So just a little bit of a background. Firstly, well, can I say that it's very easy for me to do a show and tell jokes in front of thousands of people. That doesn't scare me, but this does. I need to get that out of the way. So the way that this all happened was because I was doing a show in part of a world tour last year, and Delia she came to the show. It was in Bedford, the United Kingdom, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm coming to Australia, and I'm speaking at the Australian Humour Studies Conference." And she goes, "I'd love to see you there." And the first question I said was, "Well, what other comedians are going to be there?" and she said, "There's no comedians." and I kind of thought to myself, well, why not? You are studying about a humour, and it would just kind of make sense. And I thought, well, okay, well, I understand it, it's an academic study as well. But I thought, you know what? And I've got an academic background in science. I've got a pure science degree, an honours degree in food science. But I don't have a formal degree in humour studies. But
don't worry, Joe. Nobody does.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes me feel better. Right. So I thought, you know what? And then when she told me, I said, well, what's involved? What do I have to do? Because well, just get up, talk about language and how it affects what you do, and then there's a question and answer. And to be honest, I was actually more excited about the question and answer because I'd really love to hear what you have to think about what's going on with comedy. And so just a little bit of a quick, brief background. And it's interesting that I've come on just after the Fringe to Famous, because that's kind of what happened to me. So I started doing stand-up in my honours year. I'm only just going to give you a 2-minute overview of what happened. I started doing stand-up at the Comedy Store in Sydney in English. I have an Italian background. I got asked to perform a show at an Italian song festival in Sydney, and so because I knew that all the people there were Italian, I actually started doing some of my jokes in Italian, so it was a bilingual delivery. Well, the phone didn't stop ringing after that, and I started getting a following just with Italians in Sydney. So much so that it started growing. On the 10th of September 1999, I recorded an album which was bilingual. That launched my career in Australia. People were recording it. That album then, in 2001, became the #1 comedy album in North America on the HMV charts. My second album was #3. Bill Cosby stopped me from being 1 and 2. So basically, I was doing a show all over the world, and I'd become a millionaire at the age of 27, performing to only Italians. So I went from just doing a fringe show to Italians all over the world. That then expanded. I started doing shows with the guys from the Wogs Out of Work and Acropolis Now. My market grew further, and I've been doing this for 28 years, and last year was my biggest tour ever with 140,000 tickets in 9 countries, 157 shows all over the world, and I've been doing this for 28 years. So that is my background, and I don't, I'm boasting. But there's a reason why I say that, because what I wanted to talk about today was about how comedy has changed, how the language of what you say and how you can say and the words that you use has changed, and how the nuances has changed. And of course, the biggest thing affecting comedians today is this whole term of the political correctness. And I just think that political correctness, firstly, I don't think it belongs in comedy. I think political correctness in comedy is like having an occupational health and safety officer at the boxing. It goes against the grain as far as I'm concerned. But we have to deal with it, and it has so much to do with the words you use, the context, and so on. And up until about 7 years ago, we could just joke about anything, and like I said, and the topics, of course, that I joke about, being ethnic. I mean, Italian background. So we did the WOG stuff, the WOG jokes. That's what I was known for. My show's clean. I don't swear. I don't talk about anything vulgar, profanity, sex, drugs, or any of that kind of stuff. But I do talk about family. So it's kind of like I was being compared to Bill Cosby without the rehypnol. So that's if you want to, that's where I was going with that. So how has it changed for us to know that our show is being successful, that we're doing well, because you can tell, you know, every 30 seconds how you're going in this business on stage. It's the roar of the darkness, really, because, you know, when you're up there in the spotlight, and it's that sound that's changed in the last 7-8 years. Now that's the sound of what I like to call the sound of cognitive dissonance, because once upon a time, you know, people would just laugh and they would just laugh, and that was it. And now what's happening is that you can actually hear it on stage. You can hear people having to think about what they just laughed at, and people are becoming scared to laugh. So they kind of they sort of I shouldn't be laughing at that. and when they're around other people, especially, things change, and so that leads to us being concerned as comedians as to what language we use, because we don't want to be what they call cancelled. You know, now cancel culture has. Well, you know, let me give you 2 examples of 2 comedians that have been cancelled. One we've just mentioned is Bill Cosby, and the other was Louis C.K. Now, both were cancelled for similar reasons, except Bill Cosby's was a lot worse. And if you don't know, obviously, the Bill Cosby story, he was drugging ladies and you know, raping them. Louis and obviously he's found to be guilty. Louis C.K. Wasn't doing that, but he was exposing himself to ladies after a show and so on in his hotel room. Now, one has been permanently cancelled, and that's because Bill Cosby had the image of being the father of, you know, of America, and he had that clean image and so on. To find out that he's done such a thing is just horrific, and he'll obviously never come back from that. But Louis C.K. was cancelled at first, but cancelled on TV. But he has subsequently come back, and he's now touring again, and his comedy album about what he did and what happened, actually won a Grammy, I believe, 2 years ago. So he has come back. So there's 2 types of cancel. One is being permanently cancelled. The other is, you know, being cancelled, but he wasn't allowed to do TV because his people knew what he wanted to do. And I think that's really what one of the things that it comes down to. So how does it affect us? What do we have to do, comedians, these days? Is we, you know, have to be smart about how we get the point across. We have to be a little bit, you know, a little bit cleverer. It's kind of walking that fine line, if you like. I mean, you know, one of the things that I talk about because I have to be very careful, because I do race-related jokes, that I get labelled as racist. That happens a lot online, and you know, and I actually say that we are all racist. We just don't realise we're doing it. You know, and I'll put this to you, and this is the way we do it, because obviously laughing is involuntary. You can't help what you laugh at. It's an involuntary reaction. So if I was to say to you, you know, then I look around, I bet you everyone has done this. When you're driving and someone cuts you off, you can't tell me that you don't play that game in your head where you say, I bet you I can guess who the driver is. Right? And you see, in a way, that's getting that message across, you know, without saying what you want to say. And we really have to kind of do that these days. We have to be very, very careful how we portray and how we get our messages across. And what I've also noticed is little things like just the change of one word. I'll tell you the example. So I do a lot of shows in Canada. I have a daughter in Canada that I didn't know about. So when I first found out about her, I live in Melbourne. I grew up in Sydney. I thought, I've got to tell somebody. I know, who am I going to tell first, mum or dad? And being Italian, you know, background, it's a big deal to be able to have to tell your old school Italian dad that you've got a daughter that you didn't even know about on the other side of the world with a girl that you're not even in a relationship with. It's a big thing in our culture. So I flew my dad down and I told him what happened, and he said, well, you know, we're going to have to tell mum. And I said, look, I'm flying up to Sydney in a couple of weeks. Please don't say anything to mum. Let me tell her what it's not something you want to tell your mum on the phone. And I said, Dad, please promise me you won't say anything to mum. And he looked at me in an Italian accent. I don't know. I said, right, yeah. So I flew up to Sydney and I sat my mum down. Now these are the exact words that came out of my mum's mouth, which I use in the show, right? I sat my mum down and I said, Mum, I need to tell you something, it's important, you know, but don't freak out, I'm not going to jail, I'm not sick. She turned around, she goes, that's all right, I know. I said, well, what do you know? She goes, I know you're gay. Now, okay, that's an absolutely true story. So, and I'm glad you guys found that funny, because now I've been doing that gag for about 7-8 years. And when I did that, I guess the same reaction as it did here. But in the last year, I've been doing this joke, and I do it exactly the same way as I've been doing it for 7 years, exactly the way that I've just done it today. But all of a sudden now, I can't use the word gay. So it's just only in the last year. It's sort of, and how do I know? Because I can tell the reaction. Again, the sound of the darkness. So the sound that's been coming out of that darkness in all my shows all over the world has just changed in 1 year, right? So now I've had to change it, you know, and the punchline, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? How can I get the same message across? And now in the show I say the gag, and my mum, instead of saying, I know you're gay, she says, I know you don't like boys, right? And that gets exactly the same reaction, actually a bigger reaction, but that's replacing the word gay. So, you know, there's a lot of these tiny little things that we can't do. And another thing is, I mean, people laugh harder in the dark than they do in you know, like in a matinee show when it's light. People don't want to be seen laughing. It's funny how people change because when they're in a group, they don't want to be seen laughing at certain things. Whereas, you know, like if I got every single one of the people that are here and told them one particular joke, one-on-one outside there, they would laugh. And if I was to do a similar joke, different subject, but you know, like maybe a racial joke or a sexist joke, but in front of everyone, I would get nothing, right? Because that's just, people are scared to laugh in front of other people. They don't, you know. So we have to sort of pick our audience, I suppose. You know, the thing that I think is happening is that it's very polarizing these days. You know, comedy, humor. So you can actually joke about anything, but not to anyone. And I think that's a really, really important point. And as comedians, and I feel sorry for the younger comedians who are coming up, because, see, I can do an Indian accent in my show and I can do it well. A young comedian, like, seen me do that show and said, oh no, you can't do that. I said, well, why not? I said, that's what I do, you know. I'm not putting down anyone who got it. I can do the accent. He cannot. As a new stand-up comedian, working the comedy circuit, if he starts to do accents that don't pertain to, he's an Italian and Greek fella, he won't be given much work. We've also seen a lot of changes in you know, what you can joke about. Obviously, you can joke about men. You can say anything you want about men. Men can say anything about men. Women can say anything about men. But men can't say anything about women or anyone, you know, with gender or race, punching down. I can make jokes about Greeks and Italians, not a problem. No drama. Or Lebanese. I can't make jokes about Indians or Asians. That seems to be punching down. And I'm like, well, you know, this is what makes Australia Australia. We like to take the pisses. You know, I think people know when you're being nasty. I think that's very obvious. But it's affecting us. We have to be very, very careful what we say. I mean, there's gags that I can do in front of people in my show and in certain corporate environments, which I couldn't do on the radio. You know, I grew up with a very strict Italian dad. You know, I've got a 3-year-old now, and I want to discipline him the same way that I got disciplined. So half of me wants to discipline my son the way I got disciplined, but the other half doesn't want to go to jail. Now, you know, you can say that. You can say that. And you can say that on radio. But, you know, you can't say this next bit where you say, you know, I say, you know, because back in the day, well, you know, today you cannot hit kids, but back in our day, you could hit anybody's kid. Right? So that first part I can say on radio. The second part I couldn't because it just, you know, evokes all sorts of comments from people, and you know, and it's changed. And just to conclude before we sort of get on to some questions, because I'd really love to have a chat to you more about this. Stereotypes. You know, this is where I think a lot of this is sort of pointing towards, because, you know, we make jokes about Greeks and Italians and, you know, and so on and so forth, and people think it as a stereotype. Well, a stereotype leads into what comedy is about. It's just a characteristic repeated over and over about a particular culture, about a particular topic, about a particular person that we see over and over. That's what makes us realise or come to identify with that particular culture, race or person. So why is a stereotype so bad? I'd like to see the word stereotype or the kind of connotation of that change. And you know, I think also the biggest change that's happening as well in terms of comedy, not only in Australia but all over the world, is the age of comedians. You know, I mean, look at what happened to Barry Humphries, the late Barry Humphries, who helped start the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, who got cancelled because of certain comments that he made, and then they really wanted to instate that. But and we've got to be. I'm 50, and I talk about being a child of the 80s and the differences between the 80s and now and all that kind of stuff. But young people see that as what they call boomer humour. That's the phrase. I'm not sure if that's something you've heard or you start to become aware of it. Yeah, it's starting to become that is what they call boomer humour. And it's interesting how you travel the world and things change. So last year, as I said, I did 157 shows. There were gags that I did in Australia, and I started my Australian tour. Everything was fine. I started then my North American tour in Vancouver. There were certain gags that I did just fell flat on their face. You just absolutely, people did not want to hear that kind of stuff. They just didn't laugh, right? Then you move away across into the middle of Canada and into Toronto, then they laugh again. The UK was very, very interesting. So I did 12 shows there. I'm doing another 10 shows this year, and in booking some of the shows in the United Kingdom, some of the venues wanted my script. Now I'm on stage for close to about 100 minutes straight, sometimes 2 hours. And you know, stand-up, the nature of stand-up is you just move. Sometimes I talk about this, sometimes I talk about that. Some nights I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go over there. I don't really have that much of a script, but a lot of the venues wanted scripts. And one of the venues actually looked me up on YouTube and said, no, we don't want your show here, it's too offensive. Right? And I said, well, you know, I've got an audience. You know, they're kind of certain people that will come to my show, and I know who they are. They know what I do. That's what they come to see. But I said, why can, you know, we just want to hire a venue and put on the show. You know, there's a large Italian community in this particular area, and they wouldn't let me come because they found it too offensive. And they also said, I said, my audience know what I do. And they said, we're not worried about your audience, we're worried about the people that work here. Because we don't want the ushers and anyone working in the bar to be triggered by your content. Right? And that's where we're heading. And that's what I just wanted to say. I just wanted to say thank you as well for having me. I love what I do. I love the mechanics of comedy and the mechanics of writing, and how different words and as we discussed here, how it all affects people and what we can and what we can't say. And we're moving into a very, very treacherous waters, comedians. And a lot of people have said to me, have I pulled back? And I'm proud to say that I haven't pulled back. I've actually started throwing a few more punches to be able to fight for the right to be able to say what we want to say. Of course, within reason. I mean, like I said, it's not a license to be nasty to anybody and just to punch down, because that's not cool and that's not clever and that's not what we should be doing. We want to try and to be able to have fun, to include everyone, but be clever about it at the same time. So hopefully we can move that way. Thank you very much.